John Mackey, CEO of Whole Foods Market, to come to our conference. And it turned out that he was gracious enough to accept our invitation. Very humble guy, sat in the front row and watched the speeches and then gave his amazing keynote. And that was actually the first year that my parents came to the International SFL conference. By the way, I'm gesturing at my mother, who's right over there. And my brother. Yes, they deserve the applause. So it was the first conference that they were at, and I just remember sitting there in my chair being so enthralled and so excited about his remarks, because it wasn't just a message that rang true for those of us that were already liberty advocates. It was a message that appealed to people from all walks of life who may not be converted to the ideas of liberty yet, but just believed in bettering society and making things better for everyone in the world. And John Mackey is a person who's able to deliver that kind of message. And the more I learn more about his efforts with conscious capitalism, the more I appreciate how we can craft our business structures and the messaging to communicate exactly what we value and what we think we can bring to society to improve the entire human race. So John being that example of real activism and being really dedicated with a lot of passion, it makes me even more excited to be here the first time that John is now on our board of directors. So we're really thrilled to have him on our team. And so tonight we get to be part of a great conversation between those two men I just mentioned. So please join me in welcoming John and Alexander to the stage.
John,
Alexander,
thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So Sloan mentioned this idea of conscious capitalism, and some people in the audience may be familiar with it, maybe not so much. It's kind of a controversial concept in libertarian circles. It flies in the face of Ayn Rand's claim that selfishness is a virtue, and Milton Friedman's claim that the social responsibility of business is to maximize profits. You even debated Milton Friedman on this back in 2005 in Reason magazine. Why do you think Friedman is wrong, and why is conscious capitalism a better way of thinking about capitalism and business?
You just want everybody to hate me, don't you? Well, of course, I admire Milton Friedman. He's one of my heroes, so I'll say that in the beginning right here. But and of course, Rand and Friedman were great defenders of liberty, and yet part of their message isn't going to reach a larger group of people. And I think it's because it sells capitalism a little bit short. If you think about, every business has the potential for purpose, a higher purpose than only making money. And of course it has to make money. I explain it in two ways. First, my body makes red blood cells, and if I stop making red blood cells, I'm going to die. But it doesn't logically follow that just because I need to make red blood cells, that's the purpose of why I exist, to make red blood cells. Well, similarly, business cannot exist without profits. If it doesn't have profits, it's going to die. Profits is the money that it needs for expansion, to renew its equipment. Profits are extremely important. But it doesn't logically follow that that's why the business exists. And if you think about it, doctors, they make a lot of money, but their purpose isn't to make money. Their purpose is to heal people. Doctors heal, teachers educate, architects design things, engineers construct buildings. All the professions refer back to some type of value creation, some type of purpose beyond just making money. And business and capitalism has been put in this narrow box by its enemies that say it's just about the money. Business is about just making profits. You see, they're just greedy, and they're selfish, and they're exploitative. And now you may want to say that's a virtue. I think it'd be better to flip it on its head and say it's a lot more than that. And so conscious capitalism is to be more conscious about what business is doing in the world. And business is the greatest value creator in the world. It creates far more value than all the governments and all the nonprofits by a factor of exponential factor. So why not say that? Why not get out there and talk about the purpose of business? And it doesn't exist just to make money for its shareholders. Of course it should make money for its shareholders, but it has customers and has employees, it has suppliers, it's in communities. It's a much larger system. And all of those they're all exchanging voluntarily with the business for their own gain. And what I learned in business is that when we try to optimize the system to create value simultaneously for all of them, you're going to have a more successful business. So that's what conscious capitalism is about. It's about repositioning, in a sense, reframing the dialogue in a way that appeals to people that are not just libertarians.
So let's talk about the way that you've gone about creating value. Over 30 years ago, you started Whole Foods Market, originally called Safer Way.
I appreciate that. It was 40 years ago now.
40 years. So 40 years ago, started Safer Way, a nice little jab at one of your competitors at the time, and you were filling a brand new space almost. Over the last 40 plus years, things have really changed. A lot of your competitors, including Safeway, have started to adopt Whole Foods practices and are part of this larger new industry in groceries. What has that been like, especially to see your competitors take your practices and use it themselves?
I mean, that's the way capitalism works. And that's how the society progresses. You have innovations, and the innovations are studied, they're copied, and they're iterated upon. And so that's a good thing. It took them a long time. I mean, it really did. And I mean, I always say that for most of our history, Whole Foods just completely flew under the radar. Nobody was interested. As one venture capitalist who turned us down said, "You guys just seem to be a bunch of hippies selling food to other hippies." That doesn't seem like a very big market. And if I'm wrong, I don't think you can compete with Safeway anyway. So he was wrong. And our little $45,000 investment ended up we sold to Amazon just 6 months ago for $13.7 billion. So that's a lot of value creation. So, yeah, but they're competitors, so I have no great love for them. And I wish they would do more than copying our marketing. I wish they would actually copy and be authentic the way Whole Foods is. So, but again, that's the way capitalism works, and I'm happy that we're having an impact on the larger world because we're a purpose-driven company, and so the purpose is being fulfilled.
Times have clearly changed. This past year has been one with a lot of change for you personally. A little over a year ago, you moved from being co-CEO of Whole Foods back to being the sole CEO. A few months later, on the very same day that your new book, The Whole Foods Diet, was released, several activist investors announced that they had taken stakes in Whole Foods and wanted you to significantly change things. And that ultimately led to this sale to Amazon, or perhaps started a series of events that led to that. Are you willing to share what happened with all of that from your perspective with us?
Well, we don't have enough time to share all of that. It was 2017 was definitely one of the weirdest years of my life. It was a definitely bizarre year. So much did happen, and I can tell the Amazon story real briefly. And we did have shareholder activists. They were trying to take over the company. They were trying to get rid of our board. They had a campaign against me. These guys do their research. They don't start activism just like that. They researched us for probably a year and a half or whatever, just to get all their ducks in a row when they launched their campaign. I can go on about activism and some of the things that I think are flawed in our current system that allows a minority of shareholders to potentially take over a company. It's a topic for another time. But what I realized was that Whole Foods was vulnerable because of the competitive incursions that others had made. Our same-store sales had slowed down and began to decline. We had we had averaged 10% or 8% same-store sales growth for 35 years. And we had the highest sales per square foot. We had the highest EBITDA multiples. We were an incredibly successful, profitable company. That attracted competition, and on the margins, they began to take some of our customers away from us. And as soon as that happened, the activists came in, and things that I had always considered a virtue, like directors who never wanted to leave because they loved the company so much, became a liability. And without getting into all the details about who we talked to, we did talk to other companies besides Amazon. But when I met the Amazon people, we flew up to Seattle, myself and 3 of our executives, and we met with Jeff Bezos and 3 of their senior executives. And it was really like falling in love, if you think back in your own life. No, seriously. Because, when you fall in love, you have what I call the conversation. You stay up all night and you talk, and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. She's the one, or he's the one, or whatever. You fall in love. That's how we experienced Amazon the first time we met them. They were like so smart and so creative and so kind of not corporate, very authentic people. And we were finishing each other's sentences before the first meeting was over. And exactly. So the Whole Foods people, we retreated and went to a restaurant, and we were like looking at each other and said, those guys are incredible. Do you think they liked us too? And it turned out they really, really did like us. They were saying the same thing. They didn't tell us until after, we finished the deal, but that had happened for them too. And 4 days later, they sent a whole team of people down to Whole Foods. And 6 weeks after that first meeting, we announced our merger. So it happened very quickly. And 2 months after that, we got passed. I don't know how President Trump confusedly thinks that Amazon owns the Washington Post. He hates the Washington Post, so he hates Jeff Bezos, so he hates Amazon. And I was thinking, man, you guys are going to block this merger. But it did get through the regulatory agencies fairly quickly, so that was good. And in answer to the next question, how's it going? It's going fantastic. We're 6 months in, and the merger's going very well. Whole Foods has been able to drop its prices. These guys think really long term, and they're very creative, and Whole Foods is also very creative. So we're in the process of kind of reinventing food retailing. I'm having the most fun that I've had for a long, long time. I get to be creative again instead of deal with shareholders and Wall Street, which is a drag.
Now, I'm told we have 3 extra minutes than we planned, so perhaps we can actually get into a little bit. Whether you agree or at any point during this process started to agree with the pundits who said this might be a reason that capitalism doesn't work. There were articles that said activist efforts like this are an indictment of capitalism. Did you ever have that feeling going through this?
That it was an indictment of capitalism? It's proof of capitalism. Again, we started with $45,000 in capital, and we compounded it. And our first year of sales was $300,000. Our last year of sales was $16 billion as an independent company. Do the math. The compounded annual growth rate for 38 years is like 22%. That's pretty darn good. That's capitalism. That's what happens. So I could say that because of the way the capital gain tax work and the way the laws are set up that encourages shareholder activists, I would say that the system needs to be reformed to get investors to think longer term. And but in no way does this prove that conscious capitalism doesn't work. That's how we got to be so successful. And that's it's a good example of capitalism working. However, pundits are always ready to go tell you that this is finally the end. Capitalism's about to die off, and yet it's pretty resilient. We got through the New Deal, and we we got through 8 years of Obama, and now we're 2 years through Trump, and I mean, we're still kicking.
And you mentioned conscious capitalism in there. There were other pundits who said, well, if Whole Foods can't make it on its own as a conscious capitalist company, others can't either. That's an indictment of this approach.
You know, I like to think that Whole Foods is infecting Amazon. So part of the deal is we get to keep our culture, and Amazon is a very powerful culture, but we've merged, and they are letting us be autonomous to a large extent, and we're affecting them. So, and they're affecting us. That's what happens in a good marriage, right? You change. If you want to stay married, you change.
And in what ways do you see Whole Foods changing from working with Amazon right now?
In lots of interesting ways. You know, Amazon is very much obsessed with customers, and their whole business model is built around creating more value for customers. And Whole Foods is too, but they're better at it. They're more extreme than we are. So we're making some internal shifts to be even more customer focused going forward. They have incredible leadership principles and the way they think about, the way they analyze, the way they approach business decisions is a very, very rational. It's a bunch of INTJs running Amazon, basically. For those of you that know your Myers-Briggs, and Whole Foods, we're more heart company. So it's kind of got there's a strong kind of a little feminine, masculine energy thing going on there. But they're changing us in lots of ways, and my joke is that, you know the old saying, I could tell you what's going to happen, but then I'd have to kill you. Except in this case, I could tell you what's going to happen, but then Amazon would kill me. So there you have it. Next question.
It almost seems like instead of seeing other companies as competitors, this is an example of how capitalism promotes collaboration. Instead of being an independent company or competing with Amazon if they went a different way, you now get to work with them.
I mean, the thing that people don't understand, and I think libertarians maybe understand this a little less, because there's, you know, the individuality, the independence is so powerful within the movement and the individuals that are attracted to it. And yet, Whole Foods has always been about fulfilling its higher purpose. And we exist, and our purpose is to nourish people and the planet. That is Whole Foods' higher purpose. Amazon's going to help us fulfill our higher purpose better than we could do on our own. We went about as far as we could go. But now we have a whole world we can go to. We have a supply chain capability unmatched. We have intellectual capital now working with us that's way beyond our own. So it's about fulfilling the higher purpose of the organization, why we created it, not an ego trip to be independent for its own sake. All I can say is Amazon's the perfect partner for Whole Foods Market, and you don't have to believe that, but just watch what happens over the next 5 to 10 years. Watch what happens, and then we can have a follow-up conversation. Wait till we produce children. It's going to amaze you.
So, in some ways it seems like the idea of conscious capitalism is starting to permeate the business community and even Wall Street. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investor in the world, just published a letter to CEOs saying they need to adopt a higher purpose and take care of their stakeholders, the things that conscious capitalism has been espousing for years. But it seems difficult to tell the difference between those companies that are actually committed to principles like that and those that are really just greenwashing, want to use that rhetoric in order to obtain good public relations. In a New York Times article recently, one of the investors that tried to change it, Whole Foods, Jana Partners, was hailed as being a company, as an investor that's trying to do good because it was pushing Apple to produce educational products. How can you tell the difference between companies that really have a higher purpose and are trying to do good living into that, and those that are what's called greenwashing?
Yeah, oh, it's a good question. I don't have a magical formula for you. I can tell you that Jana is definitely not one of those good guys. If I had time, I'd tell you what they tried to do to Whole Foods and how I think unethically they acted all along. But I'm not going to do it today, and it's going to show up in the newspapers probably if I did, so I think I'll remain silent on it. But I'll meet you at the bar later on and tell you the real story there. I think you have to be discerning. I mean, we now live in a world that's far more transparent than ever before, and it's more difficult to hide these things. I mean, ethics is always paid in business, but it oftentimes takes longer for the bad actors to be discovered and fleshed out. But it's a lot easier today than it used to be. So the social media and the ubiquitous cameras that are everywhere, we're always on stage. We're always being watched. And I think that the bad guys get discovered sooner than they used to.
And the last question for you, not on Whole Foods, but on Students for Liberty, actually. So in one of our first meetings, you did something really smart. You told me as soon as you sat down, Alexander, I've already written a check to Students for Liberty, so you don't have to ask me for money. But then when I said I wanted to ask you for more to get more involved with Students for Liberty, you responded, Alexander, be careful, I have more money than time, which may not have been a great move.
Oh, but you didn't have to tell everybody that.
But you've not only been a financial supporter for Students for Liberty, you've joined the board of directors. You are giving more of your very limited time, especially with this merger with Amazon, to this organization. And I'm curious if you could share with all of us why.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I need to reconsider. Nope. I think I committed to the board before Amazon bought Whole Foods. But no, I mean, I know what the purpose of that question is, and I think it's a good question. And I mean, I've been dedicated to the freedom movement. I mean, I became a libertarian when I was, I'll talk about that tomorrow. If those see my talk tomorrow, I'll kind of give you the story behind it. But I became a advocate of the freedom movement in my early 20s. And I was just wandering around in a socialistic sea in Austin for years. And I believe that social change is always going to occur from the young. My generation is not going to change their views. They've made them up a long time ago. And the hope is in youth. And the youth doesn't yet know what it can't do. It still has the courage to dream boldly and then go out and make those dreams come true. It is always what we need youth to do, because they don't know that they can't do it, and so they go out and do amazing things. And students, SFL is, I mean, I saw the slides. I mean, I'm on the board. I see the information. It's beginning to have this, not even beginning, it's having a worldwide impact. It's affecting tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands and eventually millions of young people that will create the future. So I don't know how I can spend my time or my philanthropy dollars that I give to the freedom movement any more effectively than by giving them to SFL. I'm very proud to be associated with SFL. For the record, I did write another check, right?
John, thank you so much for joining the board, for all of your support and everything that you're doing.
Thanks, Hudson.
We really appreciate it.